Utah is home to 13 units of the National Park System. The Beehive State is one of the premier national park states in the country, largely centered on its mighty 5 parks and the state's spectacular Red Rock Canyon country. You'll find some of the busiest parks in the US here, but there are still plenty of places for solitude and exploration, as well as some lesser known sites that are well worth your time. In this video, we're hitting them all, diving into the national park sites of Utah. Speaking of those mighty 5, let's start there, at Arches National Park. Arches is, of course, world famous. Nearly 1.5 million people came here last year to see the wonderful geological display of natural stone arches, bridges, fins, and spires. Despite all those people, though, it's actually a relatively small park, the second smallest of the mighty 5, behind only Bryce Canyon. There are over 2,000 named arches in this park, along with many more smaller openings and arches in the making that simply don't have names yet. Popular ones include Delicate Arch, Double Arch, and Landscape Arch. Also, these arches aren't permanent. They are geological features that appear frozen in time for us, yes, but are still very much active in the grand sweep of time. Wall Arch, for instance, famously collapsed in 2008. Arch's much bigger but much less visited neighbor is Canyonlands National Park. This is the beating heart of Utah's canyon country, sitting right at the confluence of the Colorado and Green rivers. Those rivers actually divide the park into 3 main sections. So if you think of the rivers coming together in the middle of the park and forming like a Y shape, the wedge at the top of the Y is the Island in the Sky District, a massive mesa piercing right into the heart of these carved and sculpted canyons below it. Absolutely incredible views from here, and this is where most people go. The Needles then is located on the right side of the Y, or the east side of the Colorado River. It takes its name from the abundant spires of Cedar Mesa sandstone that are common in this area. The Needles are a little harder to get to and a little more remote, but overall still pretty accessible, unlike the Maze, which is found on the left side of the Y or the west side of the Colorado River. It is by far the most remote section of the park and is actually considered to be one of the most remote places left in the entire lower 48 United States. There's no paved roads, no visitor amenities, nothing. It is a totally self-sufficient and backcountry park experience, and you should only visit here if you absolutely know what you're doing. The middle child, literally, of the mighty 5 is Capitol Reef National Park, so named because some of its rock formations were said to resemble the U.S. Capitol building. The big standout geological feature here is the Waterpocket Fold, a gargantuan 100-mile buckle in the Earth's crust. It was formed when the Rocky Mountains were uplifted and the subsequent geological activity reactivated an old fault. The west side was lifted up much higher than the east side, producing the geological feature we see today. Also, pie. Capitol Reef, specifically the town of Fruita, is known for its fresh fruit orchards, which are baked into pies that you can purchase daily during the right season. Just make sure you get there early. Moving right along, there's Bryce Canyon National Park, which is actually not really a canyon at all. I have a whole video about this, but essentially, instead of a canyon, Bryce is actually just the eroded side of a plateau. Its famous hoodoos are carved out of the edge of that plateau through a process known as ice wedging. Bryce is also the smallest of the mighty 5, but is the second most visited. And the final member of the mighty 5 is the most popular of them all, Zion National Park. This was the second most visited national park in America last year. It's known for famous hikes like Angel's Landing and the Narrows, both of which are centered around the unique geology of Zion Canyon. Its steep, bright red sandstone walls were carved by the Virgin River and are juxtaposed against the lush valley floor where there's much more water because of the river. Zion Canyon is not all there is to do, though. There's lesser known sections of the park like the left fork of North Creek where Subway is, and the Kolob Canyons. All right, that's it for the mighty 5. Let's move on to the rest of Utah's NPS sites, some of which are just like mini versions of their larger, more famous cousins. That definitely applies to Cedar Breaks National Monument, which is right next door to Bryce Canyon, or almost right next door. It's got a similar story to Bryce as well. This park protects the eroded edge of a plateau combined with striking geological formations. Then there's Utah's biggest national park site, Glen Canyon National Recreation Area, which it technically shares with Arizona, although Utah has by far the majority of the area. This park is very different from all the others we have talked about so far or will talk about in the future because it centers on a man-made reservoir, Lake Powell. At one point, this area would have been just home to the free-flowing Colorado River and the magnificent features of Glen Canyon. but then the Glen Canyon Dam went up in the 60s and now sits Lake Powell. This whole series of events and how this place got dammed and this reservoir got created is very controversial. I have a whole video about it if you want to learn more. But essentially, the way this park works now today is the Bureau of Reclamation manages the water storage and energy infrastructure here, while the Park Service oversees the recreation aspects, hence the National Recreation Area designation. Then, located entirely within Glen Canyon National Recreation Area, but technically an entirely separate NPS unit, is Rainbow Bridge National Monument, protecting one of the largest, maybe even the largest known natural bridges in the entire world. Accessing this park is kind of like its own little journey through the ever-shifting water situation in the West. Before the dam was built, it used to be pretty hard to visit because it was so remote and there was no real way to get there except for a long canyoneering expedition. But then, when Lake Powell filled up, it became very accessible because you could just take a boat there. But now, because Lake Powell's water levels have been getting consistently lower and lower, this side canyon that Natural Bridges is located in is drying out, and once again, it's becoming harder and harder to visit. Next, another little cousin to one of the Mighty Five, Natural Bridges National Monument. This was actually Utah's first ever national monument and NPS site before Zion, and similar to Arches, as the name implies, it's known for its natural stone bridges. Now, being in the desert Southwest, you would expect Utah to have some archaeology/culture parks, and you would be correct. Although technically shared with Colorado, Utah is home to most of Hovenweep National Monument. Like many archaeological sites in the Southwest, it preserves the ruins of ancestral Puebloan peoples, including several impressive multi-story towers. Now, technically, Utah also shares another site with Colorado, Dinosaur National Monument. But as I carry on with this series, I've got to have some sort of rule over how I cover parks that are shared between states, and I think the easiest way to do that is just going to be like which state has the majority of the park's land. And in this case, that is Colorado, so I will just cover Dinosaur National Monument then. Moving on though, for Utah's last two parks, we'll head up to the Salt Lake City area. Nestled high in the Wasatch Range is Timpanogos Cave National Monument. Now, a couple unique things about this park. One, as a high elevation mountain cave, guided tours, which are the only way to visit the cave, are only available May through September because of the weather and snowy conditions. And also, the only way to get to the cave to even start your tour is through a strenuous trail that gains over 1,000 feet of elevation in 1.5 miles. And you're already going to be at over 6,000 feet in elevation to begin with, so this is a proper adventure here. And finally, Utah is home to Golden Spike National Historical Park, the only primarily history-focused park in the state. If you remember the Transcontinental Railroad story from your history class, where the Union Pacific Railroad, working from the east, and the Central Pacific Railroad, working from the west, eventually met to complete the first railroad across the entire country, and they famously pounded a golden spike to commemorate the occasion, yeah, this is where that happened. So there you have it. That is all 13 NPS sites in Utah. Most of the sites are located in the spectacular red rock country of southern Utah and are mostly focused on outdoor recreation. But there's still something here for everyone. If you're a history or a culture person, you really will not find another collection of sites like it in the national park system or across the country. Let me know in the comments down below which ones you've been to and which one was your favorite. As always, if you're feeling generous and would like to support my work directly, I do have a Patreon where you can do that and get all sorts of good perks like a Discord server and trip reports where I dish out kind of more advice just like I did here. That's over at patreon.com/National Park Diaries. All right. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.